Arnie Johnson, a man found wandering the county roads, covered in blood and in a complete daze, on the day the devil made him do it. But is the devil really responsible for a murder, or is it all just a hoax to try and get off scot-free? From the Conjuring series, The Devil Made Me Do It, is a true story that has intrigued and terrified audiences worldwide. This true crime case, famously linked to the Warrens, is shrouded in controversy and dark secrets. So join me today as I peel back the layers of the myth and reveal the fact and fiction as we explore the real events that inspired this historical haunted story. I'll start by presenting you the story from The Devil Made Me Do It, the real life story, and then I'm going to go over some debunking, exposing, misinformation and lies and just utter confusion so that you have all of the information and you can decide for yourself whether you think this is a true story or not. At least the paranormal side, we do know that the true crime part is true. The biggest thing that I've pulled out of doing research in this, if you find that someone is blatantly lying, at least a couple of lies, it's pretty telling of the validity of a person's story. And there's a big difference between misunderstanding information and going out of your way to create misinformation and create lies. The murder. It was February 16th, 1981, when Arnie Johnson called in sick to work and joined his girlfriend, Debbie Glatzel, at the kennel where she worked. His sister Wanda and Debbie's 9-year-old cousin Mary were also hanging out at the kennel with them. Alan Bono, the couple's landlord and Debbie's boss, bought the group lunch at a local bar, proceeding to get very drunk himself. The group continued to hang out for the rest of the day, and later that night, Debbie went out with the girls to pick up a pizza. Bono had a habit of getting drunk, and sometimes he passed out in Arnie and Debbie's apartment downstairs, so because of this, Arnie and Debbie wanted to eat the pizza at Bono's place, hoping that he would just pass out there and they could go back to their place at the end of the night. So everyone went upstairs to have some pizza and continue hanging out. Fairly soon after that, Bono, who was very drunk, became really agitated. Debbie, trying to defuse the situation, told everyone to leave and go down to their apartment. As everyone was leaving, Bono grabbed Mary's arm to pull her back in, and he refused to let go of her. Arnie, upset, then went back into the apartment and demanded Bono let go of Mary. Wanda, Bono's sister, recounted the following events to the police. She said that Mary ran for the car as Debbie attempted to mitigate the situation by standing between the two men. Wanda tried in vain to pull Arnie away, and Arnie began growling like an animal and then drew a 5-inch pocket knife and began stabbing at Bono. And I couldn't find exact details on it, but I guess the girls stayed, from how I understand it, but Arnie wandered off. A few hours later, Arnie was found wandering the streets miles away, covered in blood, and unable to remember anything that happened. And it was about 3 hours after Bono got to hospital that he died of his wounds. Arnie told the officer who arrested him that he did not mean to hurt anyone and he honestly couldn't remember what happened. The officers then told him that he was being arrested and charged for first-degree murder, after which Arnie apparently passed out for 20 to 25 minutes, and when he woke back up, they brought him over to Bridgeport Correctional Center in lieu of a $125,000 bail. But what were the events leading up to this murder? How did Arnie get to the point of taking someone's life? And how did the Warrens get involved? And is any of this paranormal stuff true? Well, let's explore that. The possession of David Glatzel. It all began with the Glatzel family, specifically David Glatzel. In 1980, when he was 11, David became possessed by the devil. At first, he claimed to have seen an old man with coarse, ruddy skin wearing a plaid shirt and blue jeans in the house. The old man told David to beware and told him that the family shouldn't live there or bad things would happen. This old man pushed him onto a waterbed that had been left in the house's master bedroom. No one else seen this apparition, but David began to soon show odd behavior. There were supposed unexplained scratches and bruises. There were night terrors, and David would throw fits as well. One time, apparently, he even pulled a knife on his grandmother and attacked her. After 12 days of this, his family decided to contact the Warrens for help. Now, there's conflicting reports as to whether it was the mother Judy or the sister Debbie, but one of them had seen the Warrens' lectures prior to these events, and that's why they were suggested to be contacted. However, and this is the first hole that we're going to cover, the Warrens have gone on TV and officially said that the church contacted them for this. They didn't say that the family contacted them, but the family consistently has said that they contacted the Warrens themselves. So there's the first lie that we catch the Warrens in here. Now, after the Warrens were called in, allegedly, many exorcisms were then performed on David. At one such exorcism, Arnie supposedly told the demon to take him instead and leave David alone. Lorraine would then scold Arnie after for taking such a risk. Supposedly as well, there was a well on the property that apparently housed the demon, and I couldn't find any information as to who said that this was the case. I'm assuming the Warrens told them that. I don't know. But the only time that anything demon related that Arnie has memory of is Arnie went to this well to try and, I guess, confront the demon, and he says that he's seen the demon inside the well, and I guess he said that he felt like he got possessed, or it was a final stage of possession or something when he saw the demon, even though he does go on record as saying he doesn't remember any of the other possession signs and things that other people said that he was doing. So I did try to do some research on this well and try to understand like where this story came from, and I honestly couldn't find anything about this well. It seems like the story was just conveniently showed up when the court case happened, because no one really talked about this well until after this murder happened and after the court case was getting started. So after this incident with the well, Debbie, his girlfriend, said that Arnie would go into trances. He would sometimes bark and growl, and he'd get really aggressive and throw things or break things. And like I said before, Arnie doesn't remember doing any of this. So soon after all this happened, Arnie ended up attacking Bono, leading to Arnie's arrest and Bono's death. The court case. It was not an unusual crime, Police Chief John Anderson told the Post. Somebody got angry, an argument resulted. We couldn't have a simple, uncomplicated murder. Oh no. Instead, everyone in the whole world converges on Brookfield. Now, there are a few things that made this court case a bit of a circus. One, this was the first unlawful murder to ever occur in Brookfield, Connecticut. But second, as soon as all this happened, the Warrens went out of their way to contact every press outlet because they really wanted to sell this whole idea of the devil actually made Arnie do this. Now soon, Artie Johnson would end up getting a lawyer, Martin Manila, and he took his case pro bono after he spoke with Lorraine and Ed Warren. Manila was very excited to have the first case where the defense was going to be that the devil made me do it. Manila is quoted as saying, "The courts have dealt with the existence of God, and now they'll be asked to deal with the existence of a demonic spirit." But the judge on the case, Robert Callahan, he was very quick to reject the demonic possession defense. Allowing such testimony in court would be irrelevant and unscientific, he said. The court will take judicial notice that the profession, the business, or hobby of locating demons has not risen to that level of viability where it would be of assistance to the jury in deciding the case, Callahan said. And to be fair, the judge is right in this. This is technically like spectral evidence, you could say, and they already went down this path with Salem in the United States history, and they don't want to go down that path again. This just opens a wide door for a lot of cases and precedents to be set that a lot of people could get off knowingly by just saying that the devil made them do it. So of course the judge doesn't want to allow this in because a lot of people would take advantage of this. So before the court case even happened, the judge immediately struck it down. So Ed and Lorraine were going to all the media and trying to sell this is going to be the first demonic trial ever. And that's what the media was printing. But it didn't go forward as that. So instead, the lawyer Manila, he implied a self-defense argument at the trial, pretty much saying Bono attacked him or things got out of hand, whatever it may be. Now, the trial happened pretty quickly. It lasted only about 3 weeks. The jurors never heard a single word of a demonic possession or the fact that Johnson demanded the entity jump into him and out of David. There was nothing paranormal brought up at all during the trial. On November 24th, after the jury deliberated for about 15 hours over 3 days, Arnie Johnson was convicted of first-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. He ended up being a very model inmate, and he was released 5 years later. While he was in prison, he also did end up marrying Debbie Glatzel, and they stayed married until her death in 2021. All right, now, all of that is a very high-level overview of the basic facts of this case. I guess you could call them facts. What we're going to do now is I'm going to take you through a lot of the inconsistencies and things that don't really make sense, and honestly, just kind of walk you through some things that sort of debunk a lot of this paranormal side of things. All right, so let's get into the expose and debunking here. The aftermath and truth of the matter. So that was just a really basic initial high-level overview of the story. There are several versions of the story. I'm trying to pull out the stuff here that has been corroborated, like is printed across multiple newspapers and wikis and different things, like different research places. I usually try to match up stories with like a few different places. So if the same thing shows up in like 2 to 3 places, usually I try to do 3, but if the same thing shows up over and over, then I'll go with that version of it. But I did notice that there were a couple versions showing up in multiple places too. So this case gets a little confusing, but I believe the reason is because of the lawyer changing it from a demonic argument to manslaughter. So the story had to kind of change to match the narrative so that he would win the case. But as we go over this information, if you have anything to add, if you have anything that you'd like to correct, please leave a comment below. So before we hop into this, it's important to point out that the Warrens showed up at the time that the satanic panic was starting to take rise. And I definitely recommend that you go and check out my other video that I did on exposing the Warrens, as I do believe that they were just grifters, honestly, and they were making money off of the satanic panic and the intrigue of ghosts and demons. And for anyone unfamiliar, the satanic panic was an odd time. It consisted of thousands, over 10,000 unsubstantiated cases of satanic ritual abuse, which is sometimes referred to as ritualistic, organized, or sadistic abuse. And all of it started in the United States in the 80s and spread out through many parts of the world by the late 1990s. And it still is around today as well. Before the satanic panic, people weren't really blaming stuff on demons and weren't really like calling out witchcraft for everything. So this was a ripe time to introduce a powerhouse couple who fought demons for a living. There's a lot of information here to cover, so kind of split things up into a somewhat chronological order. So I'm just going to start going through some of this info, and maybe you'll find some of it interesting and some of it enlightening as to the truth behind what really happened. So to start, we have the possession and the exorcisms. The biggest thing about this case, and this is where I personally believe that all the paranormal side of this is just untrue. There's a lot of different stories out there where each side and each person involved is contradicting another person. And personally, like when it comes to stuff like this, if you find a couple lies, that's usually quite telling and points you in the direction that this story's probably been made up because people are forgetting things and they're leaving holes in it. So there's different reasons as to why David became possessed. Ed and Lorraine go on record as saying that Debbie, the sister, and Judy, the mother, were toying with witchcraft when they went on a skiing trip or something like that with some friends. But the Glatzel family, they all said that it started at that house. Like David even said that it started at the house when he met that man who pushed him onto the waterbed. So we have two different stories there. Then we also have two different stories about how the Warrens got involved. The Warrens say that the church called them in, and they go on record saying this on a TV show. And the link to that episode of the show, I will add it to my references as well. But they kind of go on record saying stuff that goes against what the Glatzel family says. So they said that the church called them in, but the Glatzel family, they said that they called the Warrens in. Apparently, Debbie and Judy had an interest in the supernatural and the paranormal, as one of them apparently attended Ed and Lorraine's talk, and that's how they heard about Ed and Lorraine. Now, if they were also toying in witchcraft, or if the mother was toying in witchcraft, that's possible, but I couldn't find any corroboration of that story by any of the family members, so I don't know if it's true. But now we have two different stories, two different times, and it's the Warrens versus the Glatzel family version. And the Warrens have a track record in other cases, as I talk about my other video, of other things they lie about. So this just leaves a lot of holes in this whole story. Now, when it comes to David, he was suffering from a mental illness, and even his brother, like modern day today, goes on record saying that that's what was going on when he was younger. Now, the family did go on record saying that their doctor said that he had a minor learning disability, but then David was also enrolled in a school for disturbed children. Those schools for disturbed children in the 80s were things like if they're having not a good household back home, if it's causing them to act out in any way, it could be something that they were born with, like a developmental disability. So it's a broad term, but the fact that he was enrolled in this means that obviously they were struggling with him and he couldn't fit into normal school because I guess he was acting out or whatever was happening at the time. We don't have information on the details of how he ended up in this school for disturbed children. Now, apparently the family did reach out to the church, and a Father Nicholas Rico of the Diocese of Bridgeport, he told People magazine at the time that the Glatzels were investigated by the church, but no exorcism was performed because he says the family would not submit David to the necessary psych tests beforehand. So essentially, they wouldn't actually get a psychologist to look at him properly. There are reports that his mother did eventually send him off to psych, and the psych was saying that he had nothing wrong with him, but he wanted to follow up with the family as a whole and meet with them together. So it's possible that the psych overlooked a probable mental illness, but clearly the psychologist that they went to had concerns about David, who was saying he was seeing demons, obviously had concerns about his home life, and that's why they were requesting a whole family session together. But the mother never went back to that psychologist. So there was something that psychologist noticed to request the whole family to show up. But again, this wasn't enough psych testing and not enough psych profile for the church to approve an exorcism. Now, the dates are unclear on that. That may have happened after the Warrens got involved. It may have been just before the Warrens got involved. But the Warrens were kind of coaching the family on what they needed to prove in order to get an exorcism. So it's possible that this happened after the Warrens got involved. And officially, the church came forward multiple times in multiple newspapers saying that the Glatzel case had been investigated. No rites of exorcism were performed, even though the Warrens were saying that there were something like 4 priests or something that performed exorcisms and that they were willing to go on record if the trial went forward with a demonic motive. But those priests would not speak to the media. And there are reports that these apparent priests were transferred to other parishes afterwards. Also, Lorraine Warren kept saying that she had documentation proving these exorcisms happened and had documentation of these priests in their statements, but she would not release that either. The Warrens have a habit of saying that they have proof of things and they don't release said proof of things as well. They have done that in the past with things that they didn't want scrutinized or things that they just didn't seem to actually have. All right, and then just circle back to the coaching. Carl Glatzel was always very much a voice of reason, or attempting to, at least try to be a voice of reason, even when all this stuff was happening. The Warrens didn't really care for him because of that. But in the Netflix documentary, The Devil on Trial, Carl says that he remembers when he was about 15, he was watching Ed and Lorraine sitting at the kitchen table, and they were telling David and their mom how a possessed person would act. And they were saying things like, well, he can start cursing at you and spitting at you. He'll grunt and growl like a savage. And Carl goes on to say, my concern was, why talk about the subject when we're sitting right there? They wanted to make sure, we heard it, and we did. Like, you're leading him on to what to do. There was obviously some coaching going on because they were also telling the family, make sure that you take pictures and do audio recordings when this stuff happens. So Carl goes on to explain as well that there was stuff that David started doing that he wasn't doing before the Warrens were called in. And it was stuff that the Warrens said a possessed person would do. So very much implanting this idea of things that he had to do to prove that he was possessed. Additionally, Carl also explained his father didn't believe in any of this stuff, and he hated that this whole possession angle was even being explored by the mother. And the thing is, the father just wasn't buying into it. So whenever David would start acting out, and when it just actually really bothered his dad, and he just hit the end of his rope, he would just walk up to David and yell at him to stop, or apparently would like slap him sometimes and tell him to stop. And he'd say, "Get over there and sit down." And Carl said, sure enough, David sat down and was very quiet. So if someone's possessed, like that doesn't happen. Now, I mean, I'm talking as if there's fact about people being possessed, but all the cases that we hear of, you can't just tell the devil or the demon inside to quiet and sit down. That tends to it doesn't listen like that. So the dad just wasn't really buying into all this stuff, and David seemed to be aware that his dad wasn't gonna just bow down to him acting out like this. David was suffering from some mental illnesses, and Carl does say that. He was suffering from mental illness when he was younger, but Carl says that he's gotten treatment since then and he's better now, or at least better than he used to be. I mean, he's still living with whatever it is. And the thing is, after their mother died, Carl made a discovery, and this discovery could have exacerbated existing issues. It could have even caused damage to David's brain to give him a mental illness. So this discovery is sleeping pills. Apparently, their mother had been drugging the family to get them to, I guess, be quiet and go to sleep at night. So after their mother died, Carl and his wife were sorting through the parents' belongings. This was in 2011. As Carl was sorting through everything, he found a note, and he said, "My mother wrote down everything. She has OCD. It'd be on a piece of paper, a calendar, whatever, she'd write down notes. On this one note, it said, well, the family had their medicine tonight and everything was good." So Carl started looking into what this medicine might be, and he discovered that their mom had been putting Somanex into their meals, and Somanex is a sleeping pill. Carl said, "She's been giving it to the whole family for quite a long time. I remember my mom serving us dinner and her bowl was always separate from ours. So she was dosing the entire family." Now, Somanex in high doses, it can cause hallucinations. It can also cause weight gain, and that was an issue as well that David was dealing with. He put on weight really fast suddenly. Now, it doesn't cause these hallucinations unless it's like high doses, but apparently she was giving it to them for years, like probably their whole life. So some people suspect, well, what if their tolerance was just really high and she was giving more and more to them and maybe that caused it? And some people are saying too, if you're giving a child sleeping pills every night for who knows how many years now, it's very possible the long-term use of the sleeping pills could have even done damage to David's brain. And there have been no real studies done to evaluate the long-term use of these type of sleeping aids. So we don't know for sure what it can actually cause. Doctors have also said that people with existing problems taking stuff like this, it can cause them more severe side effects. Either way, the mother drugging the family is obviously a concern. The home life, clearly, like, things were not hunky-dory, and it wasn't this perfect American family as some people try to sell it off to be. So that's some conflicting information about the possessions, but also there's some information there that you could say kind of debunks a lot of the possession too. Even just the dad being able to get David to stop when he finally gets frustrated with him, that right there should tell you enough that the kid wasn't possessed by anything. Now let's talk about what happened, all the statements that people made the day of the attack or just after the attack, or even as things developed into the court case, statements that changed and so forth. So the biggest one is, the stories given the police officers versus the possession story. Obviously, some things do not match up in there, but I think all of that as well has a role to play with the strategy change for the court case. But even just on the day of, the EMS that were there heard Debbie say to her father, "Oh, Daddy, he didn't mean to do it. You know how he gets when he's been drinking." Whereas then after that date, Debbie would just be firm trying to explain that Arnie was possessed the whole time. And then she started telling stories about instances where she saw the possession happening. But she didn't talk about the possession before this attack happened. She started talking about it after. So Debbie was telling people that she was witnessing Arnie go into trances or that he would get like suddenly violent, and Arnie didn't remember any of this. And the thing is, she's the only one that ever witnessed this. No one else witnessed Arnie go into these trances or get violent. Even during the day while he was working all day, he never once changed. He was still his normal polite self, and he didn't go into any sort of fits or trances either. And his fellow employees went on record to say that. And it was the day after this murder happened that she was then telling people that she was sure that he was possessed. Now, what about Arnie's statement? Well, supposedly, when he was being loaded into the police cruiser, he said, "I need help because I've got a drinking problem." And that's Officer Fairchild said that he heard him say this. Now, the drinking, we can get into that. Apparently, they were for lunch, it was called the Mug and Munch. And there were waitresses there that went on record to say as well that they spent about 3 hours there. And the girl who served them, she said that Arnie and Bono were drinking and they shared 3 crafts of wine between them. So there's about 15 glasses of wine that they split between the two of them. So they were both inebriated. And whenever the Glatzels of the Warrens tell the story, they try to tell it as if Bono was the drunk one. They don't come out and say that Arnie was sober, but they do come out and say that Bono was drunk. But both Arnie and Bono were drunk. And when people get drunk and then they get into an argument or altercation, stuff happens. It's a common thing, which is why else the police said it's a pretty open and shut case, and why it actually matches up for manslaughter, to be honest, because it wasn't premeditated murder. Then there's some inconsistencies with what happened that day. There's different things said in newspapers. There's different things that people said the police said. This isn't really to debunk anything. This is more just there's so many inconsistencies in this story that we really cannot take this at face value, and we really got to question the paranormal side. And that's why I'm pointing out some of this stuff. So Debbie's story, she says that Arnie went up to Bono's place to repair his stereo. And when Bono refused to pay Arnie for the repair, that's what started the altercation. She does go on to still say that he did grab one of the girl's arms and everything like that still did happen, but the arguing was kind of happening when they were all trying to leave, right? So she says the argument started with that. Now, the police during the investigation, they were saying that during their investigation, their findings is that they were arguing over Debbie, not a stereo repair. So there's a bit of confusion as to what exactly they were arguing over. But also Carl goes on to say in the Netflix documentary too, that Bono was really possessive of Debbie and would get jealous very easily. And he's seen him actually argue with men over Debbie before too. So there's that as well. Then the last thing regarding statements, this was a strange one, and I found it recorded in one place, but I didn't find too much corroborating the details of this, so I'll just mention it, but, take it with a grain of salt. Apparently, Arnie's 13-year-old sister testified during the trial, but then was declared a hostile witness. So Janice Johnson, his sister, told a grand jury that she had seen her brother stab Bono, but during trial she recanted the testimony and said she didn't remember telling the authorities anything. As well, I saw some statements online too from Debbie saying that they didn't actually witness the stabbing. They didn't know that it happened. And I couldn't really find a good explanation as to why they just let Arnie walk away. because clearly he was covered in blood, and they did call an ambulance to come help Bono. Like that is recorded that they were on scene. I feel like there is some information in there that possibly Debbie just let him try to escape or whatever it might be. I don't really know. Or if they were just scared of Arnie, which is completely possible as well, but she didn't put that in a statement to the police, maybe because she was worried it would hurt his case too. Now let's talk a little bit about every person's motives in this particular case and story. All right, so to start, the lawyer's motives. This would be the defense attorney. So the defense attorney, Martin Minella, took on Arnie's case as pro bono, which is not unusual for a lawyer to do. However, he was not considering taking his case, and he wasn't offering his services until the Warrens reached out to him and he spoke to them. There's a Washington Post article where Minella just kind of really makes it obvious his motives. Minella essentially says that this would be an unprecedented case, first of its kind, to claim demonic possession. So this would be highly publicized and it would get his name out there. So he saw this as an opportunity to get high profile and lucrative clients afterwards. He is quoted as saying, "People are talking millions when they talk about this. Not hundreds of thousands of dollars, but millions." Also, he said, "Everyone is interested in this case. Everyone. All the top studios are interested in this, all the top producers." Lorraine was really good at convincing people as well that they were going to make a bunch of money in Hollywood with their story. So it's very good chance that she really talked this up to this attorney as well, that he would make a bunch of money by representing this client too. And we can be guaranteed that she did make it clear to him about her Hollywood motives, because she does go on record with reporters saying as such. Lorraine Warren confirmed with a Post reporter. She said, "Will we have a book written about this? Yes, we will. Will we lecture about it? Yes, we will. Our agents at the William Morris Agency are talking to film producers." So she's telling reporters this. And pretty much immediately after the murder, her and Ed started calling a bunch of media in, and they were making like a big scene of it, trying to really sell the story. And again, Ed and Lorraine are supposed to be a man and woman of God, and they talk about this a lot, that they're godly. And a man was just stabbed and he died. And within like a month or something, a couple months, this was all that they were thinking about. Getting the media there, writing a book, making a movie, and making money. Now, what about the family's motive? Pretty much the family was told by Lorraine that if they went along with the story, they would make a whole lot of money. They would be like rich, essentially. But Carl goes on to explain in the Netflix documentary that Lorraine was really pushy on a contract. She brought it over to his mother, and Lorraine was really just trying to push her to sign it right away. And his mother wasn't too sure what it all said or what it all meant. She's not a lawyer or anything. And Lorraine said, "Oh, don't worry about it. We have your back." Like things like that. Like she was like, "It's just, boilerplate. It's standard. Just go ahead and sign it and you're going to make tons of money." Lorraine was kind of like manipulating the situation to try to get her to avoid going to a lawyer to confirm the contract, which is actually illegal and can make the contract null and void, actually. But the contract, essentially, they sold their life rights to Ed and Lorraine. And they sold their life rights for the profits of only the book. But they were only given a check for $2,000. And I really don't think that the book only sold that small amount. It seems odd that that's all that they got. Also, additionally, Carl implies too that his mother liked the attention. So, the mother was really being fueled by possible attention, fame, money, definitely as well. But he said that his father was really just like apathetic to the whole thing and didn't believe in any of it. So that's why he probably didn't care as well with the contract, because it's not a true story in his mind anyhow. So now, what about Debbie and Arnie's motives? First, to start, I'm just going to circle back a little bit to Arnie's motive for attacking Bono. Now, this is all from Carl, but Carl says the murder of Alan Bono I never even thought it was connected to David. There's nothing demonic in this. Arnie was very possessive of Debbie. There was speculations and rumors that Debbie was having an affair with Bono. And that goes back to the police report when they said they were investigating things, that they said that Bono and Arnie got into a fight over Debbie. So that's a possible real true motive for the killing that happened. And I mean, if both sides were drunk, it probably was like a in the moment kind of crime of passion deal. So manslaughter would make sense. And once he's sober, he's like, oh, I wouldn't do that. I'm not that type of person, which everyone said he was a very pleasant young man, everything of that nature. And that probably was the case when he was sober. I've met plenty of people who became completely different people when they're drunk. And the stabbing did take place outside the apartment building. And there is some news article, and I don't know which newspaper this is from, but I'll put it up on the screen, where it actually says that witnesses said that Bono made an obscene reference to Debbie, and then Arnie became enraged, and then the two men got into a scuffle, and Bono was stabbed. And that's apparently where the police got it from, was those witnesses that were on site. Seems like there's a lot more witnesses than they originally sort of imply in this case as well. Now, that's all motives for why it all happened, but motives for why they did the demonic spin on it, the story. Pretty much Debbie was leading a lot of this. Arnie honestly was saying that he didn't remember doing these possessed things that Debbie was saying he was doing. And yeah, he probably didn't remember it because he didn't do it, but he believed Debbie. Everything that Debbie said that he was doing, other people in his life weren't witnessing. It seems Debbie was just trying to keep him out of jail. Like, she loved him, right? She was trying to keep him out of jail. And even after all this, even after he got out of jail, Arnie has been quoted as saying that he never had an exorcism and he's not possessed. He pretty much has said that he doesn't believe he was possessed. And he says, everything seems fine. Life is moving forward. So he kind of has dropped this and he wants to drop it. Debbie still continues to say, no, he didn't do it. He was possessed. I think a lot of that is really just Debbie trying to keep his name, clean, and trying to say, oh, this man is a good man and he would never hurt anybody and he was possessed by a demon. And it's trying to kind of just clean up his image, I think, so she can protect him, maybe as so he doesn't become a pariah in the community or whatever else it might be. But Debbie was really pushing it to try to get him off murder. And then I think she just had to commit to the end as well to keep his name as clean as possible. Now, what is interesting as well, we catch the Warrens in yet another lie here. Arnie has gone on to say, he said it a few times, different publications quoted him at different times. There was when he got out of jail, right before jail, things like that. And each time he said that he was never received an exorcism. But in the book, The Devil in Connecticut, which was written by Brittle, Ed, and Lorraine Warren, it goes on to say that Arnie was exorcised by a diocese in Canada who came down to do a proper exorcism of him. Now, I know that I watched an interview where Lorraine actually also says this as well. I could not find the quote. I thought it was in the interview that I've linked to my references, but I think it's a different interview and I'm not sure where I've put it off to. But regardless, it's in the book. And I do find it really convenient that it was a diocese from Canada, which would be harder to confirm back then in the 80s. So there's that. And this is just another example of two different stories. The quote of Arnie saying that he's never done an exorcism is also in the actual documentary, The Devil on Trial, which is on Netflix. I don't think I can put a clip of it in here without dealing with copyright issues. So I suggest, you can take a look. I'm adding a link to my references where someone has a full transcript of the entire documentary. You can take a look at the transcript if you want, because the quote is in there. This just further shows, you catch them in a few lies, you got to start questioning everything else that they swear is true. Now, let's talk about the aftermath, the after-lasting effect that this leaves. So, yet again, the Warrens did destroy some people's lives in the process of this whole thing. They're not responsible for the attack that happened, for Bono getting murdered. They're not responsible for Arnie. That's between Arnie and Bono and Debbie and drinking. But what they are responsible for is the really crappy childhood and rest of the life that David and Carl experienced afterwards. Carl explains that David lived a living hell because of all the negative attention he received because of this case. David's a good kid and he never bothered anybody. Carl ended up actually suing the Warrens and the author, Gerald Brittle, when the book was re-released again and when he heard that the movie was coming out. In the legal filings, Carl goes on to say that the book is complete lies. The family was manipulated and exploited by the Warrens. The paranormal investigators were opportunists who turned his little brother's undiagnosed schizophrenia into a media frenzy that fueled their fame and profits. And he said that the schizophrenia caused David to experience hallucinations and delusions. The story led both of them to lose relationships and also for Carl to lose business opportunities as well. Their name followed them. So Carl explains that all of the children were ostracized from school, from the community, and society in general. There was emotional, social scarring, trauma that happened. All their careers were jeopardized too, because the thing is, they didn't change the name of the family or the kids in the book, which nowadays you don't really get away with that stuff. You got to kind of change the name. But because the mom didn't really read the contract or understand it, she couldn't have foreseen this. In my personal opinion, I don't think that their mom would have even had the foresight to think about that, but you never know. Maybe she would. Essentially, Carl said that the Warrens concocted a phony story about demons in an attempt to get rich and famous at our expense. But as always, Lorraine Warren and the author Brittle criticized the lawsuit, saying that Carl's motive was for financial gain, which is what they said anytime someone brings a lawsuit against them. The same author, Gerald Brittle, eventually had a lawsuit against the Warrens. Judy Penny, who was Ed's secret lover, also brought a lawsuit. And each time it's they're just trying to make money off of us. That's all it is. They're just trying to extort us for money. But the thing is, the Warrens were extorting families and their stories and their lives for money too. So, however, that being said, the lawsuit, Carl wouldn't have been able to sue when he was a child. You wouldn't really understand that either. And there is a time period on these type of lawsuits. So when the book was re-released and the movie and everything was coming out, that gave him an opportunity to try to sue them. So it wasn't like he didn't want to sue them the whole time. It was that the law wasn't in his favor to try to put a lawsuit against them. In the end, the case ended up being dismissed. However, the author Brittle did end up pulling the book again from print. So even though it was dismissed, he still did that, which makes me think that there might be a little bit of something that happened behind the scenes that we're not hearing about. At the very least, using the kids' real names, I do believe that there's laws against that now, and Brittle probably was covering his butt on that too. I don't know everything about the legal system, and I don't know what the time limits would be, but I think Carl would probably have a better case of suing, although she's dead now, Lorraine, into shady practices with the contract and the signing of the contract. But Carl's mom was dead already, and now Lorraine's dead. So, this is not really going to go anywhere other than him telling his true story, his side of the story, which he's working on. He did the Netflix series, and he's looking at publishing his own book as well to correct a lot of the lies as well. In the end, the biggest thing that we can pull from this case is there's a lot of inconsistencies and there's a lot of lies. People have been caught in lies here. And I think there's enough lies that we can turn around and say that we can't really trust the story of paranormal and supernatural happenings. This is just yet another case where the Warrens have left at least one family member with forever emotional damage that's followed them through their whole life. And this is the problem with these grifters out there and these fakers. It's fine if you want to do something for entertainment purposes, but shady practices with the contract, paying people next to nothing and they sign away their life story rights, and these kids who they should have rights over their name and their story, and just because their parents didn't know any better to get a lawyer, now they have to forever live the rest of their life with The Conjuring labeling them forever. But this is just one of many cases. I am going to slowly work through all of the Warren cases, and we'll do a video on each one like this, where we pull in what's true, what's not, anything we can debunk, anything that's a lie that we catch people in. We'll get through all of them eventually. But let me know your thoughts below. What do you think about this case? What do you think is true and not true? Is there anything else interesting that I didn't talk about or cover? I do try to make these videos a reasonable time, so I don't cover everything, obviously. Leave a comment below. I'd love to talk to you. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. I am trying to grow this channel out. I have a lot of ideas for some cool shows that I think you all will love. Speaking of which, like I said earlier, don't forget to check out my last video on the Warrens, where I go through and expose their truths and lies. I will link it here for you right now. But that's it for tonight. Have a good rest of your evening.